Welcome to today's session of the People Strategy Forum. We're thrilled to introduce Janice Litvin. She's a distinguished wellness expert that's dedicated to transforming the workplace environment. She has over 2 decades of experience, and Janice's mission is crystal clear: to banish burnout and elevate workplace wellness through her dynamic keynote speeches, comprehensive workshops, and in depth coaching sessions. So, as a celebrated corporate wellness speaker and a SHRM recertification provider, Janice has made significant strides in enhancing employee engagement, retention, and productivity. So her unique approach does not just address the symptoms of workplace stress, but it also targets the cultural underpinnings that contribute to burnout. So this is going to be a very powerful session for all you leaders out there. She is the author of many influential books. One is the Banish Burnout Toolkit, and also Banish Organizational Burnout, 26 Tips for Managers. So Janice offers groundbreaking strategies that foster healthy, sustainable work environments. And so today she's going to share her expertise on moving from stress to success in a journey that promises to transform your approach and how you lead your workplace. So join us today as we dive into the strategies that not only are good for business, but is also good for your people. So welcome, Janice. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me, Sam. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. Well, as we start out on our journey today, Janice, I mean, I would love to just kind of dive in and just learn a little bit more about yourself. I mean, so what drove you to really take on burnout as a key piece that you wanted to help leaders and people with?
Well, as I was beginning my thank you for asking. By the way, thank you for that very beautiful introduction. I appreciate it. As I was diving in, so I've always been focused on health and fitness. I taught aerobics back in the 80s as I was for 20 years, and I saw burnout firsthand as I was helping companies recruit and retain top employees. And then when the economic downturn hit in 2008, I had to figure out something else to do. And I had been recruiting 20 years, so I was ready for a change. So I went to the gym, my home away from home, and there I found Zumba fitness. I became a Zumba instructor, love teaching Zumba, still teaching today. And I was wondering, what else can I do to help people love getting healthy? And through a lot of research and talking to a lot of people, I realized that mental health was a piece that was not being addressed at that time. Now you see all kinds of articles about stress and burnout, but it wasn't being addressed at all. So I came up with this strategy to help people from the inside out. Now, mindfulness and physical exercise and diet and sleep, all those things are very, very important, but no one was addressing the true causes of burnout and what to do about it. And so while mindfulness and all these self-help ideas are important, they don't get to the nub of the problem, which is the way we think and the way we react.
I'd love to dive into those pieces, but first, I just the easy element for all of us to just exercise, eating right, being healthy is one of the core fundamentals, right? You gotta cross that threshold to be able to get to these other pieces, right? So it's just really taking care of yourself.
Right. Well, the whole idea of self-help, and a tagline that I've been coining lately is mental health is health. So it's one thing to take care of your physical health, but it's so crucial to also throw in your mental health.
And so as you've, I mean, there's many of things that causes stress, and not just work, but our daily lives over the past few years. I mean, many of us in the 80s, as you mentioned, and brings me back to the golden days when there's not a whole lot of conflict in the world. The wall fell down, and there was this element of a sigh of relief for a while, and we all sang and danced about it. But at least in our part of the world, and now we're dealing with pandemics. We're dealing with conflict and distension, or just the conflicting viewpoints that we're seeing in the office and society nowadays. I mean, it's causing a lot of stress among families and workers.
Well, one thing that you mentioned and kind of buried in there was, yes, the 80s were a time of less dissension for us as a society, but managers are managers. Managers are people. And so even during those high times, there were some managers out there that had no emotional intelligence. In fact, no one was talking about emotional intelligence. And so a lot of managers thought, well, I'm really good at my job, so I should be good at managing. But being good at your job has nothing to do with your emotional intelligence and your ability to drive people and motivate and help them innovate and be creative
Right.
and be happy at
No
work.
kidding. But the big thing I think that leaders need to understand is why is wellness such a hot topic today? Why is it so important for the workforce, and why should they consider it?
Oh my gosh, there's so many reasons. They need to talk about it because
Right.
people aren't well. Like you just mentioned, we've got so much divisiveness with the recent election, the war still going on on two different pieces of the world where there's a lot of differing opinions and people feel very passionate on either side and they're angry and people have lost
Mhm.
friendships over A, the election, and B, these wars. People are fighting. So that's just one little piece of it. A good, strong manager will help navigate the waters. And just like with any negotiation, help both sides get truly heard. And really, I think we should leave those issues out of the workplace. But we're human beings, we're not machines, and we have human feelings. And we come to work, and our workplaces, especially in California and some other states, are extremely diverse culturally. So there's already a lot of cultural differences built into our, and that alone, the issues in the world can cause a lot of strife.
Right. Well, you mentioned that managers need to have new skills, and one of them was emotional intelligence. And Samantha, I was wondering your thoughts on this. I mean, when you think about the skills that managers need in this particular area, especially from a global standpoint, what are your thoughts there?
So I'm going to quote something from Janice's book, which was about the fact that people leave bosses and not really jobs, and therefore setting boundaries. So that was one of my favorite chapters in the book, Janice, because I think that's something that most people are absolutely terrible at. So
Yeah.
whether it's you as a manager, not being able to set healthy boundaries, not being I mean, actively discouraging your people from setting those boundaries and reaching out to them whenever you've got a brainwave, whether it's at 11 in the night and you think, let me just dash off this email, and people feel
Yes.
pressurized to respond to it. And also, as
Yeah.
an employee, when you succumb to the temptation of, oh, I got this email, the phone just pinged. Now that I've seen it, I've got to respond to it, even if I've barely gotten out of bed. So I think it, and this is a much bigger problem in India, I think, as compared to other parts of the world, because we're also the world's most vacation deprived nation. So we tend to ignore boundaries in the hope that we'll get ahead faster. And we've got lots of business leaders preaching 100-hour work weeks and joining the 5 a.m. club to get
Hmm.
ahead. So I think
Wow.
we're just scraping the tip of the iceberg right now, but burnout is going to be a huge, huge challenge in next 5 to 10 years, I think.
Wow, that's fascinating. You brought up, I don't know if you realize that you opened a can of worms, Samit. There's so many issues that you brought up. Boundaries is one of them. But one thing I was thinking about when you were speaking was a new issue that's cropping up, and that is neurodiversity in the
Hmm.
workplace. So when people have ADHD or autism or other issues or addiction, nobody knows. You don't wear it on your forehead. And people are expecting a certain kind of behavior. I was leading a roundtable for one of my clients recently, and someone said to me, I tell this one worker every day, and this is a manager, I tell this one worker every day that I don't like it when he does X. I don't remember what X was. It could have been that he leaves a minute before 5. I don't remember what it was. He said he's crossing my boundaries every day, and I keep telling him the same thing. I said, you know what? This person might have ADD or ADHD. He cannot receive what you're saying, or he might be able to receive it in that moment, but the thought flies away the next day and you have to start all over. That is a different conversation, and all of us have to be more passionate and compassionate when it comes to neurodiversity. Let me give you a quick it's a silly example, but it makes a lot of sense. When someone cuts you off on the freeway, you get really angry and you start, at least I do, I start yelling in my car. No one can hear me, but I'm the one that's angry. But what if that person is bringing his wife to the hospital because she's in labor? Of course you're going to slow down and go, yeah, take the space. I'm so sorry. What can I do to help? So if we can look at people with a different lens, a more lens, then we can all try to get along better.
Yes, I think that it's a good rule of thumb to take a breath. I always often think my wife is a saint because she must think I must suffer from a variety of mental ailments, but my mind is always in a different spot. So it's important to just take a breath and think about where that person is, or maybe find a way to connect with them in a different instead of anger, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But you mentioned one of the things that I want to come back to the topic of boundaries. I think that's really important because when leaders are listening, it's like, okay, boundaries, what does that mean? There's so many ways that we can think about that. One is, how we communicate, right? And so when we think about boundaries and the way we communicate, Smith brought up, and in referring to your book and some of the other talks that we've heard from you, is that making sure that you're conscientious of your employees' time off so that they can mentally regenerate and be ready and not think like they have to respond to that email and at 2 a.m. when you happen to be awake. So what are other elements as far as communication boundaries that we can put in the top of their mind?
I could talk about this for an hour. There's so many pieces to this. Number one, as a manager, create what I call a true open door policy. And what I mean by that is ask your employees how you're doing at review time. Don't just talk about how they're doing. And you can do it anonymously. Ask employees, how am I doing as a manager? What can I do better? And also setting what I call a culture within your team. And that's policies and values, like not sending the email at 11 o'clock at night. Because even if you say to me, well, they don't have to answer. They saw the email, like Sumit said, they got the ping. That gives them knots in their stomach. And already they're thinking about, oh my gosh, what have I done? And what have I not done? And what do I need to do first thing tomorrow? When really they should be relaxing. Another huge can of worms is the definition of a workplace has changed dramatically since COVID, which you all know. At first, everyone was working from home. Every CEO in the world realized that people can work from home. Now, a lot of companies are asking people to come back. I'm in the middle. I think that people should have the freedom to work from home, but I also think that there's a huge value of coming into the office at least once or twice a week on the same day as your peers, so that you build those. There's nothing that changes developing bonds like being one-on-one. But let's say a person is a mother or father, and Billy has a soccer game every Wednesday at 3:30 for the fall, whatever it is. Why can't Susan work around those hours, as long as she's working 8 hours, whether she likes to get up at 4 a.m. or work till midnight? Let her define her, unless there's a meeting she really has to be at or a certain deadline. Why can't she be at Billy's soccer game? She'll be happier. Her child will be happier. She'll feel more comfortable with her lifestyle. And then she can define what hours she works. It doesn't, as long as she puts in her reports and meets her deadlines, Who cares
No
what
kidding.
hours she's working?
So let's go. I would think it would be helpful to go through a scenario that probably every leader out there is familiar with. And so, I mean, all of us, we have high performers in our organization, and we love to celebrate them, right? They move the needle so much for our business, and sometimes also in maybe a team aspect, and also as a performance aspect overall in output. But sometimes they can get really dive into or go too far. They're not taking their time off. They're not de-stressing and so forth. And then we see performance fall. What should a leader do in that situation to help remedy and bring that person from the brink of burnout back into that performance mode?
Well, you don't know it, but you brought up two questions really. Number one, the manager should be so quote unquote emotionally intelligent that they know their people so well. They can see the little micro clues that burnout is creeping in. We don't want to have to pull someone back from the
Mhm.
brink of burnout at that level, because once somebody's tipping over the edge, they're going to slide down. And let me tell you something, true burnout means someone has to take time off. And it could be a month, could be 3, could be 6, depending on the degree of burnout. But what about knowing that within a few days, you can tell if someone's off? And let's train our managers not to sweep that under the carpet. Let's train them how to deal with it. Like, for example, you see someone suddenly doesn't have their camera on in meetings on Zoom, or they're just not as engaged. They're not not going to lunch with everybody when normally they did. Whatever it is, there's something different about their behavior. Invite them for a walk, invite them for coffee. Hey, Joe, I noticed that you seem a little different lately. You haven't been meeting your deadlines. You haven't been coming to coffee with everybody like you used to. Is everything okay? What can I do? And if there is an issue, what can I do to help you? I'm here for you to help you be successful. And at the same time, we have this work that needs to get done, but I have a feeling something's going on. What can I do to help? I know you were taking care of great uncle Bill, and now I heard he had to move into your house. Do you need resources? We have resources for caregivers. Do you need to talk to an EAP? Do you need to talk to HR? Do you want to talk to me? Do you need to change your hours? Do you need to come in at 12 instead of at 9? Do you have to take Uncle Joe to the doctor? I mean, whatever it is, be empathetic and be open to a different way of working that helps people and in effect helps your team.
So the bottom line is first, the first step is getting to know your people, knowing, when they're off. And so that spending
Yes.
time with them, understanding their swings and so forth, and
Yes.
so we spoke about boundaries, and sometimes leaders think that boundaries is something that we need to separate, home life from work life. So when we get to know our people, we really need to understand what the stressors are that they're dealing with at home to some extent. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And boundaries are not just about home life versus work life. Boundaries are about a lot of things about the definition of work. Let's say a manager defines a sign. Well, there's a few boundaries. Number one, what if a manager assigns a project and assigns a deadline, but that person can't possibly meet the deadline? Give people a little more control. Engage them when you're planning their project and ask them, how do you feel about this project? When do you think you can, let's set up some milestones. How do you feel about these? Do you think you can get these done in this timeline, or is it too aggressive? It's okay if it is, I just need to know. That's number one. Number two, the bigger part of that question is, what if the person's already overloaded and you come to them, oh, I'm so excited to talk to you about this new project. And the person's overloaded. Are they supposed to start screaming and go, no, I can't get it done? Or one thing I teach people in my workshops is express positivity and say, I'm so excited about the new project. Let's look at all my projects that are on my plate right now, and let's prioritize them all so I can get them done without burning out. I want to be there. I want to get them done. I am overloaded. We need to talk about this.
So what are the good ways that, I mean, I imagine a manager just understanding a person's capacity and their workload is important from day to day.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's part of getting to know them. And getting to know them means spending time with them. Take them out for coffee. If possible, a manager could and should be spending one-on-one time, even if it's 10 minutes, but once a week, checking in. How's it going? Do you want to go for a quick walk? Come on, let's go for coffee. Either one-on-one or with a small group.
Yeah. The other thing that I find is that, now that post-pandemic, we talked about people having to work at home, working remotely, and then now there's the call back to the office. There's some people that are working hybrid and so forth. And so there was the old management ideal that if I see somebody, I know that they're working. And, how should managers be reframing that and to de-stress the workforce?
Wow. You bring up, well, first of all, the word trust jumps into my head. If you're in a professional setting, in a professional workforce, not on a factory floor, which is, I think, what you're referring to, there's this thing called trust. Again, know your people well enough. Again, be talking to them every week. Check in with them. Don't just wait till this big deadline comes, but be checking in. How's the project going? Where are you in the project? What resources do you need? Do you have everything you need? How's it going? Is the team getting along well? What do you need? What is the status and what do you need? And so again, it's about knowing people and giving them control and reminding yourself that if you can't trust your people, they're not going to respect you back.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I think that's I often, I think Sumit was telling me a story about during the pandemic about how there was the mouse. There's the mouse wigglers, that that would had. Remember that, Sumit? And I think that the important part is that if you're hiring people that you don't trust, you already made the problem at hiring. I mean, it was right.
Right. Well, that's another can of worms, and I know that's your area of expertise. And I used to be a recruiter, but yes, hiring is a whole nother piece of, from the very beginning of the recruiting cycle to the day one and the onboarding process. The communication should be such that you're exuding trust because in the way you're treating people.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And so Sumit, I mean, just to bring one of the things you were talking about, I mean, I just want to bring back up. I mean, it was kind of shocking to hear about the new work culture in India as far as how overwork is really heating up. Now, do you see that? I mean, is this something that is new since the pandemic, or is this something that you've seen just recently?
I think it's an older phenomenon, Sam.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's probably more prevalent among millennials and older generations. The reason you're hearing a lot more about this is because Gen Z and now Gen Alpha, they're the ones who are leading the charge to push back and saying, why? Why do you want to see me in front of you for those 8 or 10 hours? Why do you want me to sit and clock in, clock out? Why can we not be held accountable for just the outcomes? And of course, like you mentioned, things like mouse jigglers, there also are AI tools which will, so if you install them on your computer, they will capture your image even if you're looking away. They'll make it look like your eyes are focused here. So you could be watching Netflix on the side, but it looks like you're focused on the computer. So there's always that kind of innovation going on. So unless we learn to trust people, they'll always be willing to find newer loopholes. So you can't really, I mean, mistrust doesn't really serve anyone, in my opinion. And it's an issue that a lot of Indian employers are grappling with, where the need to control and to watch over people is very high. Um, the founders and leaders that I work with, obviously, I can't wish away that yesterday you were the controlling kind, today you let people be completely autonomous. Um, what I suggest to them is, if your comfort zone is, if you're willing to give somebody half an hour before you want to peek over their shoulder to see what they're doing, increase it in intervals of say 20%. So instead of 30 minutes, check in with them after 40 minutes. See if your world has crashed and if the earth is still spinning. If it is, next week maybe take those 40 minutes to an hour. So when people realize that yes, the world isn't falling apart, you're able to achieve more because you're not constantly watching over somebody. I think that comfort starts developing.
I even before the pandemic, I read an article that Indian employees, even in Silicon Valley, were getting the sun. You might remember in the early days of Apple where they had that in the early days when they started having food at work, and then a lot of people had futons and working till 2 a.m. and just taking a few hours to sleep and then sleeping there in their cubicle or whatever. That's what I pictured based on what I read at the time. And then people getting sick because it's like in the northern states, people getting sick in the winter. Indian employees were having this around the clock, around the calendar, because they never got outside. Spending 10 or 20 minutes outside at least twice a day, if not more, activates vitamin D, activates dopamine, happiness chemicals, and breaks are so critical. It's just like we need the 8-hour break to sleep. We need breaks throughout the day. And that means stand up, stretching, put on music, watch Netflix, go outside, call a friend, take a walk, whatever you need to do. And not eating lunch at your desk. That's a really critical time to
Yeah,
get
really
out.
taking time for yourself. And let's talk about a few other things that are in your toolkit and in your book there. Now, one is the stop method. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Oh, I love this one because it's easy to implement and we all need it. So let's say you're in a meeting and somebody, I don't know why, somebody's rude. Who knows why someone disagrees with you and they jump on you? Or again, on the freeway when someone cuts you off. Stop stands for stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. And that means don't respond right away. Don't start yelling, but take a breath and think about what's happening and what you really wish to say or not say, and then make a decision to proceed. So if someone says something rude, stop, give them direct eye contact and say, would you please repeat that? I'm not sure I heard you correctly. And it makes the other person stop and think. So it helps us calm, and the really deep breath engages the parasympathetic nervous system and helps calm those stress feelings down.
I love this this tool because we kind of bridged on touched on it just a little bit earlier in the conversation about that person that's driving crazy, and we have the reflection of, or just jump to anger instead of really thinking about what's going on there. But when you interact with that person, you're saying, well, are you okay? What's going on? You're asking those questions. It also causes them to self-reflect. It's like, oh, well, was I blunt, or did I say something that was offensive? And it kind of brings out this potential or behavior cues that they may have an issue with. So I think that's a great way to bring self-awareness.
Yes, and a lot of us, myself in particular, were never taught how to confront and how to push back in the moment. That's something I'm working on for my new, as part of my new offerings in 2025, is helping people communicate better, because breakdown in communication is a key source of stress and burnout.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the other pieces in your toolkit is the reality spin. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, that is chapter 2. Know your stress, spin your stress. So what that means is something happens. I mean, something's always happening, right, Sumit? Something's always happening in the workplace. That's life. We're human beings. It's normal human behavior to react The question is, how upset do you get and how long do you stay there? And what is your behavior, your thought process and your behavior pattern that you exhibit to yourself and others? So, for example, let's say you have an early morning meeting and you're presenting something as part of the meeting. You go outside and the car won't start. And now you're like, oh my gosh. And you start to spin it. You start to freak out. Excuse the expression. You start to panic. And then you're like, oh no, now what do I do? How do I deal with this car thing? Or you stop, take a breath, observe, proceed, think about what is the next logical thing to do. Get to work. Text the boss, let them know what's going on, and then call an Uber or knock on your neighbor's door or some other family member and go, I need to go to work. I'm presenting today. Can you please help me out? And just let the boss know I'm on my way. Normally I'm early. I might be just a minute before because I need to find another way to work.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So it's reframing. Or another one. Here's another one I love. Another example I love. The boss texts you first thing in the morning and says, we need to talk. I hate that. We need to talk text. And so instantly you think it's bad news. Now, many years ago, you were talking about the high time of the 80s. In the 80s, I had the world's worst boss, then I had the world's best boss, and such a dichotomy. But whenever she said, we need to talk, it was bad news. And so I panicked. But what if it's not bad news? What if the manager wants to give you an exciting new project that you or a promotion or something that you really wanted? So it's not always bad news. And just because you used to have a boss that only gave you bad news doesn't mean the current boss is full of bad news. And so it's reframing your thought habits and patterns.
Well, having this awareness and also having these tools in your tool belt from your book that you have is important for leaders. But one other thing that we mentioned earlier on is that you said you were surprised about how many organizations simply don't have a well-being program in their organization. Yes. So can you kind of talk a little bit about that? What is a well-being program and why should leaders have one?
Oh my gosh. Well, when you say what is a well-being program, it can vary from place to place. Depends on the size of the organization. It depends on so many factors. First of all, being aware that you need a well-being program, because if employees aren't well, the company is not well. Unwell employees make an unwell company because they can't get their work done. They can't be productive. So number one is awareness, just like with anything. And number two, have someone, if you're a smaller company, maybe you can't hire a full-time wellness person, but you can work with HR and help them establish one, maybe hire a consultant for a few months to get it set up. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. You don't have to assign a huge budget to a wellness program at first. You can start doing simple things like Fun Fit Fridays. On Friday at lunchtime, we're all going to take a walk around the block together. On Tuesdays, we're going to have, at lunch, we're going to let people have fun cooking demos, bringing fun into the workplace. Now, I talked about the early days of Apple. You may recall that they used to have these beer bashes on Friday afternoons. And I remember visiting Facebook 10 or 15 years ago, where there was this plaza, and outside, though it was constructed where the offices surround a plaza, and people would go out to this plaza for lunch. And on Fridays, they'd have loud music and beer bashes. Maybe people don't want beer as the focal point of a Friday afternoon. You've got alcoholism and you have addiction and all kinds of issues. Maybe it should be Crazy Hat Friday day, and every Friday have a theme, a Crazy Hat Day. Put on every Friday, have a different genre of music, Latin and jazz and different. And, you know, a lot of people at work have a lot of talents. Maybe someone has a hobby of being in a band. Let them bring their band in on Friday, and it makes them happy. It makes everybody happy. So focus, and a lot of companies start with physical activity as their focus of wellness. Yes, as I said before, physical activity is important, but mental health is health too. So inspiring feelings of happiness, maybe have a mindful meditation moment on a Friday. where at lunch we're all going to, one of our employees loves to lead mindfulness. So we're going to let that employee take us all through a guided meditation for 20 minutes on a Friday, and then we're going to talk about it. Or maybe one of them likes to lead yoga or Zumba like I do, and engage different employees. You know, the employees have a lot of talents. Maybe one employee likes to paint, and everybody's going to have a fun painting thing with, club soda or whatever, as opposed to beer. So taking people through, there's free and low cost ways to engage employees in wellness by bringing happiness to the workplace and making sure people are mentally well.
Great. Thank you for that, Janice. So tell us, I mean, as we come to the top of our conversation here, what are the main things that you want leaders to walk away with from this discussion that we've had today?
The number one thing, thank you for asking that. The number one thing I want leaders to remember is that burnout is a two-way street, I use the word double-edged sword, although I hate the idea of a sword, but it's a two-sided balance, so to speak. One side is the policies and the values that create your culture, like the sending emails in the middle of the night. And number two is the way people react. So burnout requires both things to be in balance, because if somebody's meditating every day, but they have a toxic workplace, all that meditation is going to go out the window while they're experiencing all this stress at work. And people, as you said before, people leave managers, they don't leave companies.
Right. So, and what are you looking forward to in this new year? Do you have, we have a lot of leaders out there that are saying, well, I need to, take action on wellness. I need to make sure that we're training our managers up on how to create more happiness in the organization, more engagement for our employees. So what are the things that you're doing that where managers can find some more information?
Well, I'm launching, it's almost ready. I'm launching something called Banish Burnout Academy. And that will be a comprehensive program, like you say, to help managers understand what it takes to keep their employees well, and for employees to learn the tools in my toolbook, but not just on a one-shot deal. We really need a deep dive. There is research, I don't have the stats on top of my head, but there is research that people forget what they hear within, let's say, a few days. So I might do a keynote and people come up to me and they love it, but 2 weeks later, they're not going to remember the tools, even though I repeat them and I get them physically active from a keynote stage, repeating the tools through music and dance. They're not going to remember. They usually remember stop, but they don't remember them all. And so a deeper dive, extended learning kind of avenue that takes months, so that people don't just learn them, but they learn to use them and they start to make them as new habits. That's the way to help people long term.
And for those leaders that are interested in getting on that sign-up list, how do they go about doing that?
Janice at JaniceLitvin.com.
Great. Well, so thank you so much, Janice, for sharing all your wisdom with us today. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you, Samit. I really appreciate being on this live stream.
Great. For all those listening in, we'll see you next week on the People Strategy Forum. Take care, everyone.